Now we get over Ahora muy bien, las la gente que सब सॉल्व किए थे मैंने कुछ कुछ सम छोड़ दिए थे फिर ना सिर्फ एक बार बनाना है और फिर नहीं करूँगा नहीं वो पहले के छोड़ दिया मेरा काम शुरू होगा उसको तो कुछ when term of reason is that let's get it. But we know what's next thing. Because the answer is so the bottom matches and base units. What a lot of sad.
Bhakti. Good evening. कौन का कौन है? क्या है? कहाँ पे दिख रहा है?
भक्ति रुद्र भक्ति एंड रुद्र
अच्छा listen we are done. No, you can take another 5 minutes. I have plenty of time. I think I'm waiting for ये तो 10-15 मिनट आधा घंटा ले लो, मुझे कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। तब तक मैं चाय वाय पी के आ जाती हूँ, आराम से तुम लोग के बातें करती हूँ आराम। Simply I'm standing here, no point. Which are the chapters left to be done for your exam? फटाफट बोलो।
Scale. That's great. Skeleton system.
And seeds का हो गया था। Seeds are done. चेक करो नोटबुक। अचानक तुम लोग उठते हो नींद से, फिर नहीं मैम वो नहीं हुआ था। I don't trust you. Anytime you will say anything. चेक करो नोटबुक, चेक करके बताओ हुआ है कि नहीं। Pollination करना है। Pollination और fertilization कौन से सब्जेक्ट में है? बायोलॉजी की हिस्ट्री में। बताओ फटाफट मिले बताओ बुक लो।
फर्टिलाइजेशन फ्यूजन
ना ये है टेक्स्ट बुक। कौन-कौन से चैप्टर्स अभी बाकी है बताओ।
स्केलेटन सिस्टम सीड
पेंसिल या कुछ दे दो ना। There are already तीन बाकी है, तीन बाकी है। मैंने छह को जो बोलो।
Seed है ना वो बाकी है।
है वो बाकी है। 5 kingdom classification।
हाँ उसमें से काट है। लेकिन वो सेल्फ स्टडी है ना। वो बाकी नहीं होता ना।
थोड़ा सा ये उस लेसन में बस हमें नेम ऑफ द क्लास एंड एग्जाम्पल हम वो कर लेंगे।
वो हम क्लास में देखेंगे और ये सामने देखना। अच्छा ये खाली फर्स्ट टर्म के लिए ही है ये चैप्टर्स। तुम लोग को क्या आने वाला है? सेकंड टर्म के फर्स्ट टर्म सेकंड टर्म ये ओके। तो इनके ठीक है। Conditions further may be open your mouth for anything nonsense now. Either going to put you outside the classroom, or one will sit at the back at one corner and one will sit in the front. Of course, Anish को तो मैं tolerate नहीं कर सकती यहाँ पे, तो दोनों के दोनों तुम लोग पीछे बैठने वाले। Now, Jinesh, only one will tell me now. Seeds बाकी है. So 5 kingdom classification में major portion are cut off. That you'll see in case time बचता है तो last में ऐसेगा revision हमें आएगा. और क्या बाकी है बताओ? Unit 5 से क्या बाकी है?
Skeleton system scale.
Okay. 6 से क्या बाकी है?
6 में diseases, causes control, AIDS.
हाँ, diseases.
AIDS.
तो हमने ये क्या था diseases और AIDS है?
हाँ
चेक करो हाइजीन क्या है? अच्छा ये बाकी है।
यूनिट 6 से मेरा एक चैप्टर बाकी है।
यूनिट 5 से तुम्हारा रेस्पिरेटरी अभी एग्जाम है। 1 वीक में
करते करते हमारा पोर्शन पूरा रेडी
नहीं बट ठीक है for you now for you your chapters left
नहीं that's the only chapter
हाँ, that we have to compromise. So ये तुम्हारा term exam है ना? इसके बाद वाले term में ये chapter नहीं रहेगा. आज application. कितना बजेगा?
अटेंडेंस मैथमेटिक्स का है कभी बार है
हमारा नहीं है ना यूपीएस यूपीएस
साढ़े 8 बजे तक अभी हाँ साढ़े 8 Now listen. Now, out of these 3 chapters, so now which are the prime chapters? Main chapter can see their skin has skeletal system in it. So I'll try to complete first of all chapter that is skin and skeletal system. उसके बाद I'll move on to stage. बस ये से question आएगा. And उसके बाद AIDS to health लेंगे, I'm sorry, disease लेंगे, and AIDS to health also hardly it will be half an hour because AIDS to health में कुछ ज़्यादा ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. पर शायद तुम्हारे next term में रहेगा AIDS to health.
classification
That is what I'm saying. Skeletal system करेंगे उसके बाद skin करेंगे उसके बाद sleep करेंगे ठीक है ना? So these are the 3 main chapters that we'll have to take. So for you all later, for St. Mary's later, we'll see if these chapters are there, as a main chapter for the test that we'll have to see later. Let's start with skeletal system, locomotion and movement and locomotion. We'll start with this. Movement and locomotion. So first is to understand when we talk about movement and locomotion, look at the first part, constituents. When we are talking about movement and locomotion, so which is the system that we are going to study here, we are going to talk about the skeletal system. We are going to talk about the skeletal system. Skeletal system, which are the components. The components of skeletal system, if we want to understand, we have to talk about right from the concept of tissues. Also, if I say already you have come across a concept of bones and cartilage. So here also you are going to understand what are the components of the skeletal system. Components of skeletal system, mainly you understand bones and then you talk about the cartilage. So bones and cartilage are the major components. If I have to understand the bone and the cartilage, basic difference if you remember one. Bone and cartilage, do you remember? Do not have supply of blood, and bones are made up of just deposits of calcium, phosphorus. Whereas if I talk about cartilage, they are also made up of some fibrous tissues, matrix, and deposits of calcium, phosphorus. Bone is rigid, calcium is a bit flexible, and bone does not. I'm sorry, bone has got an adequate supply of nerve fibers, blood vessels. Cartilage does not have. Location, if I talk about where are bones present, bones are present all over the body. But can I say cartilage present all over the body? Not exactly. Cartilage is always present at the margins of the bone, extremities of the bone. Between 2 bones in certain cases. And extremities of the bone. If I also talk about the extremities of the bone, like the tip of the nose, extremities of the bone that we are talking about. Skeletal system, one more component that we have to understand is ligaments. Since when you talk about skeletal system, majorly we are trying to understand about the bone. Majorly we try to understand about the bone. So now, what are ligaments if you remember? Ligaments kya hai? Tissues that hold any 2 bones or the structural framework. No, tissues which hold any 2 bones. So that is the basic component that we have to understand. Very fast, look at the function that is given there. Tendons will not be a major component. I don't know. Let's see if it is given in your book. tendons are not a major component. If I talk about tendons will not be a major component because tendon is connecting the bone with the muscles. Muscles will not be a basic part of the skeletal system. So whenever we are talking about skeletal system, majorly you understand about the bones and the cartilage. So ligaments are always associated between two bones. These are tissues connecting two bones. Acha, abhi functions, but I would go through from the book only, nothing much to understand here. See the first one, functions tick karo. You get give reason questions also and many other questions, 1 mark questions also. From there, functions of the skeletal system. The first one is support. Now that you understand, why are we saying that? No functions. How can you say that the skeletal system helps in support? Why do we say that the skeletal system helps in support? It gives a structural framework, no, to the body. If I say and if I understand, is the skeletal system giving any support to our neck region, to our hands, to our shoulders, to any other part of the body, the hip region, the legs? Yes, every part of the body you talk about. Support and framework, always a function of the skeletal system. Come to the next one, protection. Here at least some few examples you'll have to remember. When I'm talking about protection, what do you understand? How can the skeletal system be associated with protection? I talk about the skull protecting the brain. Cranium. I talk about the ribs protecting the heart and the lungs inside. I talk about the hip protecting the kidneys also. Can you give me one more example? Any other example? Rib cage protecting also what? I told you already. Apart from that, sternum protecting. Sternum is partially protecting the heart. For example, the vertebral column protecting the spinal cord, the vertebral column. So with this references, you understand that yes, the skeletal system is giving us so much of protection also. No? So remember this example, take that point, you get questions on that. Movement, now that I talk about movement, how can you justify that the skeletal system is also associated with movement? Skeletal system is associated with movement. Is the skeletal system associated with movement? Yes. We generally see that the muscles of our body undergo the process of contraction to bring about movement. No. Can you think of any part of the body jahan pe bones na ho or sirf muscles movement carry out kare? Possible hai? Eyes. नहीं तो eyes में orbit है ना? These are the bones. These are the bony regions, which is acting as a support for the muscles. हमारे बॉडी में कोई भी एक पार्ट ऐसा है where muscles are there and no bones are in the surrounding and movement हो रहा है. सोचो 1 minute, है क्या ऐसा कोई part of our body? Yes. Possible? No. Nowhere. You talk about any. Here, no. If it is not. वैसे तो inner region में bone है ही, but even if bones are not there, then cartilages are there. No, I asked you, is there any other part of our body जहाँ पे muscles है, movement हो रहा है, but there is no bone around? No, there is no part of the body as such, because we are always understanding that if movement has to happen, muscular contraction has to happen, muscles are there, and muscular contraction की वजह से movement हो रहा है, तब तो bones होना ही चाहिए. You talk about any part of our body, muscular contraction and movement, then bones have to be there. Without bones, no, there is no part of our body जहाँ पे muscular contraction है और bones नहीं है. Now, what are we understanding from this concept? I am understanding now that I move my fingers. Is it only my muscles moving? No, my muscles are contracting and relaxing, but the bones are allowing, or bones are the ones which are actually pulling the muscles. Muscles are contracting, or if I say the other way, muscles are contracting and pulling the bones. Muscles are relaxing and letting the bones go. I talk about the movement of my arm. Now that I talk about movement of the arm, इसमें muscle तो contraction हो ही रहा है, but as the muscles are contracting, it is pulling the bone. And now that the muscles are relaxing, it is allowing the bone to get back into its position. Same like any part of the body you talk about. Come to the next one. So movement, leverage. किसमें? हाँ. So I was just now telling you that leverage में इतना कुछ नहीं आएगा. Formation of the blood cells. liver system, you are generally questions nahi dete usse because that's difficult for you to understand at this moment. Formation of the blood cells. What is the meaning of formation of the blood cells? Now that I talk about the different type of blood cells, what are the different type of blood cells in our body? Arteries, veins. What I said, blood cells, I said, no? RBCs, WBCs, and platelets. So when I said RBCs, WBCs, and platelets, these are specialized type of cells which do not undergo the process of division. But then we have got millions of such type of cells in our body. If I talk about the RBC, millions of them. WBCs, thousands of them. Platelets, so many, in lakhs. Then how is it possible that any moment I'm saying that the cells do not divide, these cells do not divide, and at the same time I'm saying that they are in thousands and thousands and thousands in our body, because constantly they are formed in the bone and the central region of the bone known as bone marrow. So central region of the long bones, which are known as the bone marrow, wahan pe this type of cells are formed, constantly this type of cells are formed. So now that we are talking about a concept of the skeletal system, we try understanding that I just told you, we'll now try to understand the parts. What are the different parts? Let us try understanding the skeletal system, formation of the blood cells, and the last one, that is the last point, number 6. The 6th point is very, very important. The bones are always a storehouse of calcium and phosphorus. So if I say the other way, if we have to make our bones healthy and strong, on what type of mineral nutrient always we should focus on? Calcium, phosphorus. And in the chapter on nutrients, always you're studying what are some of the food rich in calcium, phosphorus. Yeah, there. Milk, cheese. So when we are talking about milk and milk products rich in calcium, at the same time we are talking about phosphorus, various different type of green leaves, bananas, these different type of fruits, various different type of fruits are rich in phosphorus also, so we should consume them. Components, little bit of the constituents, components already we have been talking about. Now, with reference to bone, we are not going to study about the structural aspect of the bone as such here in this chapter, but we are going to talk about basic characteristics of what is meant by when you are talking about the bones. Now, let us here try understanding one concept, that the bones in different regions of the body, are they the same? The bones in different regions of the body, are they the same? No, they are not the same. So how can we categorize them structurally, majorly? No, structurally we can categorize them. So the internal structure of all bones of bone is the same. But based on the location of the body, if I talk about what are some bones, the most prominent ones to understand, long bones. We talk about short bones. What are the other categories? Long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. So now the bones can be categorized under 4 heads basically. We are talking about the long bones. So which are some of the long bones of our body? At least 1 or 2 examples as of now, try to understand. Long bones of the body, meaning we are talking about a bone which is continuous and long. No, spinal cord is not a long bone at all. So when we are talking about the bone of the thigh, the longest bone of our body, the bone of femur, the bone of the hands, some of the longest bones, the bones of the ribs, is it continuous long? Yes. So when the rib bones, continuous and long. So when you understand the long bones, I say the spinal cord is not a long bone because it is not a single bone. It is an assemblage of 33 bones, 34 bones. No, so that we cannot consider as a long bone. So which is some of the long bones of our body? I would say the thigh bone. Say suppose I talk about the thigh bone, and then I talk about the rib bones. The rib bones are the long bones. What are some of the short bones? Short bones are the bones of the fingers. They have got a specific name. You're going to learn. The bones of the fingers, the bones of the toes, these are called phalanges. These are called phalanges. So these are the short bones of the body. Flat bones. Which are some of the flat bones of our body? The sternum, the bone, a part of the rib cage, the sternum, just in front of the lungs. No. Irregular bones. Which are the irregular bones? The bones of the cranium, the skull bones. Or if I talk about the skull bones, these are the irregular bones. So whenever we are talking about some of the basic examples Look into the bones of the skull. They have got a specific shape and structure. Look into the bones of the fingers and the toe, specific shape and structure. Look into the bones of the hands and the legs, specific shape, structure, like that. So these are some of the major categories first we will understand. At least 1 to 2 examples each. What are the 4 categories of the bones first we study? Number 1 is the long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. Now let us talk about some basic characteristics to understand. Now these are experimental concepts. You can just underline this word known as decalcified bone. Decalcified bone. Now, when we are talking about, there are 2 basic characteristics. Let us talk about the first concept, that is, I talk about a bone. Now, in each of these cases, we may talk about a condition known as a decalcified bone. Trying to understand decalcified bone. What is a decalcified bone? What is it? A decalcified bone is one from which calcium phosphorus has been removed. Now, how can this be done? If I talk about even the long bones of our body, say suppose I talk about a rib bone. Can we bend that bone? Can we twist that bone? Not at all. But if this bone is not treated with hydrochloric acid, the calcium phosphorus part gets dissolved. Just dip in the acid or treat with the acid for a particular period of time. So generally it is done with taking that acid in a laboratory condition in a glass vessel, and then put that bone there. And after some time, after a few couple of hours, but of course you're not taking out your bone.
Understand, but removed from the gas.
Dilute hydrochloric acid may, when you are dipping the bone or treating the bone with dilute hydrochloric acid, what happens? The bone which is actually rigid becomes flexible. The bone which is rigid, just now I told you, can we twist a bone? Can we tie a knot with a bone? Of course not, because it is so rigid. The moment you try to bend, it will break. The deposits of calcium and phosphorus is so much and making the entire structure rigid. And on top of that, if you have to talk a little bit about the structural aspect of the bone, cut a bone into section, what do we get to see? There is a central canal and then some rings and rings and rings and rings. In the chapter we have studied. And now these are the bone cells that you understand. So does it have enough amount of matrix? So the amount of matrix in comparison with the structure of the cartilage, if I have to say, is much lesser. So now since in a section of a cartilage, if I talk about section of this part and a section of the bone, where am I going to get more matrix or cytoplasmic part? In the cartilage, cytoplasmic part will be more, and hence the cytoplasm is flexible. The cartilage is flexible. And in the bone, if I have to talk about in the tissue, in the section of a bone, the cytoplasm will be much lesser. The matrix will be much lesser. And since the matrix is less, it is becoming more harder. It is compact. The arrangement of the cells are compact. And on top of that, the deposits of calcium phosphorus, making it even more hard. So what I said, normally we can't understand any bone that we can twist, that we can fold, that we can make a knot out of it. No, never possible. But the moment you try treating it with hydrochloric acid, dilute hydrochloric acid, yes, it becomes much softer, and you can twist it and you can roll it. So now treating a bone with hydrochloric acid removes the inorganic component, calcium phosphorus, and such type of a bone is now known as decalcified. From the term decalcified, you understand calcium removed out. Decalcified. Again, when we are talking about, there's another concept that you have to understand, and this is known as the oxidized bone. What is it? I talk about the second condition. What is second condition? The second condition is, what is an oxidized bone? What is an oxidized bone? Oxidized bone meaning, when I'm talking about any particular bone, when we burn or when we heat it, subject it to extreme heat, when we subject them to extreme heat, or you burn that, Say suppose I talk about the bones of any dead animal burning it. What are we going to get after a particular period of time? Ashes. No, we are going to get ashes. And these ashes are going to be rich in, again, inorganic substances. Basically, the bone is made up of organic and inorganic both. So now the ashes that we are getting is rich in inorganic substances. So now that I'm talking about what is an oxidized bone is a bone which is treated at a very high temperature or burnt, treated at a very high temperature. And as it is treated at a very high temperature, what are you going to get? You basically get something known as ash, and the ash is rich in inorganic substances. Now, next is we talk about the basic structure of a bone. Now, to understand the basic structure of a bone, this diagram is important for you. I'm not asking you to draw now, but this diagram you will get as labeling in your exam. So check this diagram, tick this diagram there, tick this diagram there. So now, whenever we have to understand the major parts of a bone, what is called the major parts of a bone? The major parts of a bone would be something like this. That whenever I'm talking about the major parts of a bone, every particular bone, I talk about any long bone of our body, there will be something like this. The extreme ends, and what are these extreme ends called? Extremities of a bone. The extremities of a bone. And in this extremity, there is adequate amount of the marrow substrate, and this marrow that I'm talking about is known as the red bone marrow. This marrow that I talk about is known as the red bone marrow. And from the red bone marrow, blood cells known as RBCs can be developed. What next? Again, there are some protective structures. Yes, there will be some protective structures, and there again some adequate amount of marrow substances here. And what is this marrow substance known as? This is known as the yellow marrow substance. This is known as the yellow marrow. And from here, the WBCs and platelets can also be formed. What do you understand by the red bone marrow, yellow bone marrow? Basically, the marrow, what does the marrow contain? It contains a large amount of cytoplasm, various different types of inorganic ions, salts, compounds, proteins, and it is a very, very nutritive region of the bone. So if our blood has adequate amount of all the minerals that already I've studied in the chapter nutrition, various different type of macro, micronutrients that are necessary. If all of them are there in adequate amount, then the marrow substance is very, very nutritive and adequate, and that person will always have an adequate number of the blood cells. So a basic difference, if I ask you, what do you understand by a difference between the red bone marrow and the yellow bone marrow? And to write two differences, what are the two differences that you have to write? About its location, you have to write one. And what type of cells does it give rise to? So that is another one. And now I talk about the protective covering. The protective covering of the bone. What is the protective covering of the bone known as? The protective covering of the bone is known as the periosteum. Remember that word? The protective cover is known as periosteum. And here we are talking about that there will be other different type of cartilaginous tissues also. And this is what we are also understanding, that it may be also associated with specific type of cartilage, and this is known as a hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, various different type of cartilages also remain associated with the bone. So it may be again associated on the outer region of the bone. So this also can be considered as the hyaline or the elastic cartilage. So here to talk about the basic structure of the bone, only this 3-4 parts you have to understand. Diagram drawing generally does not come. But yes, labeling of the parts you may be asked. Complete this small progress check. You have done it in the school? Yes, I'll give you just 2 minutes time. Complete.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
I'm not able to see the whiteboard.
So now, if you are done with that, take one question in your notebook. Notebook nikalo. Write two differences between red bone marrow and yellow bone marrow. What I told you as differences, write down. Write two differences between red bone marrow and yellow bone marrow. Two differences between red bone marrow and yellow bone marrow. What happened with us? It was such a pain, it was such a pain. My name, from where I come, where do you stay? Difference between red bone marrow, yellow bone marrow. What will you write the first point? Red bone marrow is present at the extremities of long bones. Present at the extremities of long bones. Yellow bone marrow is present in the shaft. ये जो rod shaped structure होता है bone का, इसको बोलते हैं shaft. Is present in the shaft of the. Is present in the shaft of the long bones. Present in the shaft of the long bones. Present in the shaft of the long bones. ये चैप्टर कंप्लीट हो गया, पूरा कंप्लीट हो गया ना स्कूल में? हाँ? Do you remember the names of all these bones? नहीं हुआ अभी तक? अच्छा, हाँ? चालू ही नहीं हुआ।
हमारे क्लास में दो तीन उसके बाद हमारा
चलो next. What is the second point I told you? Yellow bone marrow is present in the shaft. लिखा? Second point. Second point. Composition भी लिख सकते हो. What type of cells it give rise to? Also you can write. Yellow, you can write the composition also as a point. Yellow bone marrow. Acha, did you write about the cell types that it give rise to? Yellow bone marrow gives rise to WBCs. Red bone marrow gives rise to RBCs and platelets. RBCs and platelets also. Red bone marrow. And composition लिख सकते हो. Yellow bone marrow is made up of matrix. Made up of matrix, adipose tissues. Adipose tissues. Adipose tissues are a type of, what type of tissue? Do you remember? Connective tissues. These are a type of connective tissues. Other side. The red bone marrow consists of matrix and variable ions. Ions and salts. Variable ions and salts. Okay, come to the next. Ions and salts. Ions, salts and ions. Now we talk about another section of the chapter. So this is all about the basic introduction. Now we talk about that this concept of bones. Now that we try understanding, how can you classify them? What is the classification of the bones? The classification of the bones to understand, or the skeletal system to understand would be, the skeletal system can be divided into two parts. What are the two parts of the two sections? What is it? Axial skeleton. One is axial skeleton and the other is appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. So now that we are talking about axial skeleton, which are some of the parts that would come under this? Under axial skeleton would come skull. Then we talk about the vertebrae, the vertebral column. Then the ribs and the sternum. So these would be four parts that would come under the axial skeleton. And what about the appendicular skeleton then? We talk about the limb bones. The limb bones or the bones of the appendages. Bones of the appendages or the limb bones I can write. These are the limb bones. How many limbs do we have? 4. How many limbs do we have? 4. How can you categorize them? Upper limbs are also called 4 limbs.
This term is not familiar.
Huh?
Appendage.
Appendages means the what is not there? Appendages means the limbs. So I'm telling you appendages or limb bones. This word is not there in the textbook, not a problem. Then you can learn something extra. Now, Spandan is also behaving like this boy. I'm surprised, Spandan. You are not like this. इसके संगत में तुम रहोगे तो इसके जैसे बन जाओगे. As a teacher, I should not tell you this, but इसका sign of improvement is very weak, feeble signs मुझे दिख रहा है. But your inclination towards this, I'm getting to see a lot. Now, appendages or limb bones, ये इस तरह के कुछ students रहते हैं. I know I'll tell you this. They understand nothing in the classroom. Sorry to tell you. They understand nothing in the classroom, but they will be only looking into the, oh, teacher, note that. That is not there in the book. Ma'am, this is not there in the book. This is not new. Now, appendages or limb bones. What is the meaning of appendages? Limbs, 4 limbs, hind limbs. So, ये याद रखना है. How many types of limbs we have? 2 types. Upper limbs को बोलेंगे 4 limbs. Lower limbs को बोलेंगे hind limbs. And next is we talk about girdles. Girdles. We are going to talk about girdles. Now, what are the 2 types of girdles we have? One is pectoral. We have got the pectoral girdle, and the other is the pelvic. Pectoral girdle is actually the shoulder girdle. Shoulder. This entire shoulder that we have is an assemblage of bones. Few bones put together. Pelvic girdle kya hai? Hip girdle. This is also an assemblage of bones. It's not a single bone put together. Few bones coming together. Pelvic girdle. Now we're going to learn each type of bones, each part, their bones and their number. That is what we are going to learn now. So one by one we'll take. Bolo. Exam number. हाँ, exam में number के साथ ही पूछेंगे.
But I just stated once. Look at the exact.
The total number they are not humorous कितने हैं? They are not stressing on the number. हाँ. किसमें? The skeletal system, when we teach skeletal system, अगर तुम number नहीं समझोगे, along with the name you should always know the number. Along with the name you should always know the number. Names or a number, then only you understand the total concept of the skeletal system. I will not teach you without telling you the number. That's up to you. You want to take it, you don't want to take it. It is optional. What your ma'am tells you, I understand from 10th standard also. I really don't like a way of teaching. Anyways, I should not mention that. आधा पूर्धा मैं कभी पढ़ाती नहीं. I will teach you the entire thing. Option तुम्हारे पास है. पूरा लेना है, नहीं लेना है. So I'm talking about first concept skull. I'll talk about the skull. Abhi, first of all, we'll understand what ये जो nature of the bone is what. What is the nature of the bone? Remember what are the types of the bones we learned? Short, long, flat, irregular, long, flat. चार तरह के. So इसमें से this is one that I have always understood. Shape क्या है? So very simple. You will always have to remember about their shape. You will have to remember about their number and which part of the body do they form. So let us start with the first one is skull. If I have to talk about the skull, which part of the body are we talking about? We are talking about the head region, no? We are talking about the head region. Follow karte raho with the figures that you have in your book also, and the figures that you have that I'm going to show you. The more you get to see the structure, that will be much easier. This chapter is very easy, only that you have to remember some names and numbers, nothing else. Yeah. So first of all, I'm talking about which region? I'm talking about this entire region. First of all, ये देखो, are these bones of a definite shape? Definite shape है क्या? If you look into this entire region, no, it as if appears that it is just like some rags of cloth, जो uneven रहता है, and then they are stitched. The entire structure of the skull looks like that. अभी अच्छा एक और चीज तुम्हें ये समझ में आना चाहिए कि whether these are movable or not. Are these bones movable? No, they are not. Immovable they are. So if I have to talk about some major characteristics, yes, what type of shape they have got? They are flat. Number kitna? How many number of these skull bones are there? Cranium 8. 8. तो यहाँ पे ये पूरा region में 8 है. What about the movable? Are they movable, immovable, or partially movable? ये 3 category होता है. तो immovable, can you move the bones of your head? Never. तो ये immovable category में आएगा. So this is immovable. And when we are talking about the basic structures of the skull, some other things that you have to remember about the skull is at the base of the skull. Okay, you get to see this. At the base of the skull, here, if I talk about at this region, now here is where our skull is getting over. ये जो हमारा neck जहाँ पे जाके खत्म होता है, ये soft part जहाँ पे खत्म होता है, that's the end of our skull. Exactly in the central region, there's a small opening. And what is that opening called? That opening is called foramen magnum. What is that called? Foramen magnum. What is this foramen magnum, especially for magnum? M-A-G-N-U-M, foramen magnum. So now that I'm talking about it, the entire brain है. What is this brain made up of? Neurons. और neurons के दो parts कौन-कौन से हैं? Neurons के दो part कौन से हैं? Axon and dendrites. So dendrites and axon. So the dendrites are all mostly here, and the axons are all coming down in the form of a bundle, and that is what you're talking about as the spinal cord. So ये जो bundle of axon है, ये head region से कैसे निकलेगा? By the way of this foramen magnum, which is a small opening. By the way of this foramen magnum, which is a small opening, और जैसे ही यहाँ से निकल के आ रहा है, again we have got the vertebral casing, the pura vertebral casing till this region, no? So here we are talking about, you are asked this, I hope your teacher again asked this, foramen magnum. What is foramen magnum? An opening in the skull through which the vertebral or through which the axons, the bundle of axons emerge out. Through which an opening in the skull, at the base of the skull, an opening at the base of the skull through which the bundle of axons emerge out to form what? To form the spinal cord, to form the spinal cord. So that much you have to understand here. Next, if we talk about the vertebral column or vertebrae. Vertebral column or vertebrae, same cheese hai. Almost when I'm talking about the vertebral column, I understand something like this. Is our vertebral column straight? It is curved. Why? If it would have been straight, then movement would not have been possible. Then we also would have been very straight, moving every time. So, ये जो curve है, that is allowing the accommodation of muscles, and muscles accommodate hai enough. That's the reason we are able to move so smoothly. We are talking about the vertebral column first of all. यहाँ पे, when we are talking about the vertebral column, so for the vertebral column, certain different concepts to understand. When I talk about the vertebral column can be divided into 5 regions. Which are the 5 regions as per the region of our body? So, which is that particular region? We talk about the cervical, we talk about the thoracic, we talk about the lumbar, we talk about the sacral, and we talk about the coccyx or coccygeal. So now that I talk about the 5 regions, how do we differentiate this? We are talking about this entire region. From where do we start? The neck region. So this is the first part. The vertebral column. So when you're talking about the vertebral column, the neck region, the bones of the vertebral column that come in the neck region, what are they called? Cervical vertebrae. If I talk about the word vertebrae and vertebra, what is the difference? Vertebrae and vertebra, when I'm talking about this, what is the difference? Vertebrae meaning I'm talking about many at a time, plural, and vertebra, singular. So when I talk about cervical vertebrae, so cervical vertebrae meaning we are talking about cervical vertebrae where I said, how many of the cervical vertebrae are there? How many cervical vertebrae are there? 8 of them. In the neck region, 8 of them. So you have to remember their numbers. So I said 8 of them here, thoracic 12 of them, lumbar 5 of them, sacral 5 of them, and coccyx a fusion of 4 and to form 1. Here it is 1 though we write, but actually it is 4 which gets fused to form 1. When we are born, it is 4. And as and when we grow, these 4 small bones keep getting compressed and become 1. Fuse and become 1. So now we are talking about this. 7 written in your book. We can write 7. Here, C7, C8 also we can write. Then in that case, we have to consider. Okay, anyways. So 7, then how much it is? 12, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Huh? 33 it should be. 33. Thoracic 12 given, no, in your book? We generally take this as. This is 4 they must have given, no? 4 they have given. Okay. It is 4, but in fusion, when it is in the fused state, if you have to write the fused state, then we have to write 1. So in that case, it should be 33 vertebrae. So now that we are talking about cervical vertebrae in the neck region, what about the thoracic vertebrae, chest region, remember? Lumbar, upper abdominal, sacral, lower abdominal, coccyx, the tail region. The tail region, the bones of the tail region. Now, if I have to talk about the specific bone, the structure of the bone of the vertebral column, is it there in your portion? Structure of the bones of the vertebral column, is it there? So when we are talking about structure, now these 2 structures to understand, majorly you have to focus on a specific structure like this. Now, if I talk about the bones of the vertebral column, something now specific to understand, what is this? Axis and atlas. So these 2 terms, first of all, you get acquainted. What is atlas? The first bone of the vertebral column, followed by axis. So what is this? It's the first bone of the vertebral column. What about this? It is the second bone of the vertebral column. And then the rest, what do we call this as? We call this as the typical vertebra. We call this as the typical vertebra or the typical vertebrae. Aaya samajh mein? So first of all, what I said, if I have to talk about the vertebral column is a rod-shaped bone, but not a continuous bone. It is made up of 33 bones put in a sequence. And when we are talking about these bones, the first bone is the atlas, the second bone is the axis. The structures are absolutely different, and the rest of them more or less have the same structure. So that's the reason they are known as typical vertebrae. But as already you know, if I have to talk about any 2 bones, between any 2 bones, what is there? Cartilage. So here also we talk about the cartilage that is present, and what is this cartilage called? This cartilage is called the intervertebral disc or gristle. What is intervertebral disc? Intervertebral disc or gristle. What is it? It's a cartilage in a sheet-like structure that is between any 2 of these bones. Now, just to have a fair look into the examples of these bones of the vertebral column, what do they have? Look at the first diagram that you have. Can you see the first diagram as a diagram of the atlas given? Can you see that? Look at the diagram in your book, atlas. So, ye jo first, what I said, what is atlas? That's the first bone of the vertebral column. Now, if you look into this particular parts, see there, it has got prominent structures like the transverse process. Dekha? Some wing-shaped structures it has. Transverse process, for attachment with the muscle. Then again, it has got some rod-like structures. Now the ligament, it has got the ligament. Can you see that? Dekha ligament in that structure of the bone. Did you notice this first part? Ligament underline karo. Transverse process underline karo. The neural spine underline karo. And okay, these are the most important parts. Now neural spine, it is like when I show you this particular structure, ab dekho, ye wala structure, almost the same that I'm showing you. Almost the same that I'm showing you, the diagram that you have here, almost the same that I'm showing you. These are the wing-like structures. These wing-like structures, which are known as the transverse processes, always articulate with the nearby. Articulate means attach, merge, attach, embed into the nearby muscle. What about the neural spine? अब ये जो neural spine है, it is just like a pointed structure, और ये pointed structure will get attached to the next bone, something like. अब ये देखो, this is the structure that I'm talking about. I was showing you, that every particular bone of the vertebral column. Which structure I was showing you just now? I was showing you the structure of this. This particular structure is comparatively flat in almost all. This is associated with the nearby muscle, and this is associated. Which part is this? Neural spine. Ye jo neural spine, it is associated, or it is something like to fit inside the bone of the previous. I'm talking about a rod-shaped bone. Something like a rod-shaped bone. So now that I talk about that, ye jo neural spine hai, and then the transverse processes hai, the transverse processes, and then the main body of the bone. This is the main body of the bone. So ye jo main body of the bone, isko bolte hai centrum. This is the neural spine, and these are the transverse processes, neural spine. Always to remember, if I have to draw the next bone here, I'm drawing the next bone here. So is it not that this is the next bone that I'm drawing here? So the neural spine, is it not fitting inside the previous bone? So the neural spine is always associated, or the neural spine is always meant to articulate. What is the meaning of this word? Articulate. Articulate means to just fit in. When I talk about a sequence of bones, सबसे important दो तीन structures में समझ में आना चाहिए. I'm talking about any particular bone of the vertebral column. ये जो region है, which is more or less flat, जिसको centrum बोलते हैं. Then in most of the bones, you will come across a structure something like this. इस तरह का wing-shaped structure, transverse process. This way, in some of them you'll get moved almost upwards, and then there will be a spine-like structure, the neural spine. So the structure is something like this. In most of them, a fan-shaped structure, a wing-shaped structure, and this. This is a single bone, but I want to show in a sequence how it is. In a sequence, I draw the upper bone again. In order to draw the upper bone, I'm drawing this. And iska jo neural spine is something like this, and then this, and then this. So what is happening? This is covered. Now you can't see the structure, it's all over inside, no? Ye neural spine, what is its function? To articulate with the previous bone. Yahan pe bhi jo bone rahega, how will these two bones remain connected? This pointy structure known as a neural spine will always articulate as if something, two structures fitting one to the other. This fitting to the other, like that. So now I'm talking about this particular region as the neural spine, I'm fitting to the other. So isko bolenge articulation, and that is how the entire vertebral column is maintaining a particular structure. You will be majorly asked questions on what are the functions of this. What is the function of through this particular region, through the, or this is the particular region which you call it as the central region through which the spinal cord passes, no? And these are laterally. Now, if I show this as one view and I show you now the entire vertebral column, so this was one structure. So ye jo laterally jo wings hai, where are these wings going? Into the muscle nearby. And can we see the neural spine now? No, we cannot, because har ek neural spine the upper bone ke saath attached hai. Are they fused? No, just attached. one part to the other. So ये है about the vertebral column, the basic structure about the vertebral column. Next is we move on to the concept of the different types of, okay, now we move on to the different, now all these basic structures, did she ask you to read, go through in detail? All the bones. Now, in this case, when we are talking about all these bones, first is the major structure of, when we are talking about the atlas. Okay, I talk about here, atlas. And now if you see here, how two bones remain attached. Take a pencil and try to understand some of these differences. So the first one is the cervical vertebra. Under cervical vertebra. Now this basic feature that I told you about the neural spine, the transverse processes centrum, that will be common for every bone that we talk about. Now, next is we talk about the neck or the cervical vertebra. Cervical vertebra. No structural aspect is of course mentioned, but here for the thoracic vertebra, you write down the transverse processes, underline that statement. Transverse processes on the extremity, underline that statement, transverse processes which serve, bears on its extremity a facet for articulation with tubercle of the rib, underline, I'll tell you, facet with the tubercle of the rib. Now, if I have to talk about, are this vertebral column associated? Is the bone of the vertebral column associated with the rib? Yes, all of them. The bone of the vertebral column. Now let us see the, I'll take 2 more minutes. Ye hai bone of the vertebral column. You are understanding that how does it attach with the bone of the rib? Facet of the rib. Now, one particular region of this attaches with the upper bone and forms the entire rod-shaped structure. Another region is that this bone of the vertebral column also need to attach with the bone of the ribs. Then only this entire structure becomes continuous. So, say suppose I talk about that ye jo pura bony cage hai, if you just take away a part of it, there is a small region from this vertebral column which is coming and getting associated with the rib, and then another part of it coming and continuously attaching with the sternum. यहाँ से एक छोटा सा region आके पहले rib के साथ connect होता है, then वहां से एक और region पूरा आके sternum के साथ connect होता है. And that is how the vertebral column and the ribs become a continuous structure. So that is the meaning of that sentence that I asked you to underline, that bear in its extremity of facet. Facet means what? A surface, a structure, a surface, a face actually, a surface which attaches with the vertebral column and forms continuity with the sternum. So here this much is important. Last, go to the coccyx. Underline that sentence. Coccyx is made up of a fusion of 4 bones. Coccyx is a structure made up of a fusion of small bones. That much. So that much only is important here. So basic structure about the atlas only you have to study. And then next stage we'll have to continue with the ribs, the structure of the ribs and their functions. We'll continue in the next class.
Basically, आपको प्रॉब्लम है टेस्ट हो गया है परस्पर तेरे सेमेस्टर में बात करने सामने वाले